AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to podcasts of Joe Walsh and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, Democrats in the House. As Noah Rothman writes in commentary.com, they're trying to figure out precisely how forcefully to condemn anti-Semitic sentiments within its ranks without alienating anti-Semites. I want to have it both ways. Contentious debate, such that a vote on a resolution to oppose anti-Semitism was postponed in the House yesterday.
Yeah, and here's what the Congresswoman said, Congressman Omar.
I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country.
Mm-hmm. That was one of her many statements. She's also expressed being perplexed about the reaction she got after saying Israelis have, quote-unquote, hypnotized the world, and many other comments she's made. She's an unrepentant anti-Semite. The last apology she offered was a non-apology that turned into, her focus is the NRA, kind of Harvey Weinstein approach to apologizing. And so Democrats have a real problem, just like they did with the anti-Semites running the P-Hat March, just like they've had with anti-Semites in the Black Lives Matter movement. They don't want to alienate bigots. For as much talk as there is about Charlottesville or Steve King, there's rebuke on the right for intemperate comments, much less actions. The left is really struggling to come to terms with it. Let me give you an example, too. Handmaidens in the media trying to do the bidding for Pelosi and Hoyer and Schumer, of course, who's Jewish. Incredible. Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd is obsessed with being opposed to anti-Semitism. Well, sort of.
Welcome back. Tonight, I'm obsessed with the rise of anti-Semitism and the game of whataboutism being played now by both parties. Stop it. You both have a problem. The House will vote tomorrow on a resolution to condemn anti-Semitism. It's a defensive measure by Democrats, prompted by not one, but two remarks by the freshman Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. Last month, she tweeted that the reluctance of lawmakers to criticize Israel was, quote, all about the Benjamins. In other words, money. And on Friday, she said, I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for an allegiance to a foreign country. Code for Israel. By trafficking in two historical anti-Semitic tropes, Jews are money-obsessed and they have dual loyalties, Omar opened the door for Republicans to point fingers and say, aha, the left has a problem with anti-Semitism. And you know what? It does. But unless you want to forget the chance of Jews will not replace us by neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, unless you want to forget President Trump saying there were good people on both sides of that debate, unless you want to forget the synagogue slaughter in Pittsburgh last year, unless you want to forget all of that, you have to acknowledge that the right has a problem with anti-Semitism, too.
I'm a little confused. Which members of the House Foreign Services Committee were responsible for, which Republican members were responsible for the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting? Neo-Nazis chanting anti-Semitic hate speech? Who among them were Republican members of Congress? The false comparison between a handful of knuckle-headed neo-Nazis in Charlottesville to a member of Congress who sits on the Foreign Services Committee to the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter? What the hell is he talking about? Doing the bidding of the Democrat establishment and the bigots within it. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jonathan Tobin. He is the editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. He's also a contributor to a number of publications, including NRO, New York Post, Federalist, and the Jewish Week. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
So what about what Noah Rothman had to say? Start there, that Democrats are trying to figure out how to calibrate a rebuke of anti-Semitism without offending anti-Semites.
Well, I think we've seen, based on the debate that's going on within the party, they're not interested in calibrating. They're just not interested in doing it. Okay. We heard yesterday, not just from members of the House who were outraged at the idea that Ilhan Omar would be even reprimanded implicitly, because that resolution wasn't going to name her. She wasn't going to lose her seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. She wasn't going to be named in it, but they still didn't want to do it, even after it had been watered down to include condemnations about all sorts of other hate. Which is kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement. When they were angry, when people said, "Well, all lives matter." Well, that was exactly what the House was planning on doing, but even that was too much for Omar's defenders. So what we see here is that the left of the Democratic Party, and remember, they're the ones with the energy. They're the ones who are the future. I mean, look at the cover of Rolling Stone magazine this month is a picture of Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Nancy Pelosi, just hanging out together with the caption, that they are the future of the party. Well, they probably are the future of the party, but the 78-year-old in that picture probably isn't so much the future. And that's why she's afraid of offending her party's base, because her party's base doesn't want any part of quote-unquote singling out Ilhan Omar, even when she's guilty of blatant anti-Semitism. And this is where, sort of the rubber meets the road for Jewish Democrats in the House, who, as well as members of the Democratic establishment and the leadership of their party, who really weren't happy when Ilhan Omar last month said that Congress was being bought by AIPAC, an anti-Semitic slur, because they knew she was talking about them. And last week, when she started this latest kerfuffle, after apologizing and Pelosi thought it was all going to be forgotten, she again said Jewish colleagues, and she's talking about Democrats, that Jewish colleagues are targeting me and Rashida Tlaib, the other pro-BDS congressman, a member of Congress, because we're Muslim. She thinks she's a victim, and she has sold this narrative to the Democratic Party on the left, and they are complicit in this now. And let's remember, Chuck Todd engaged in whataboutism. Just stop it by making those false comparisons. But the problem here isn't about stray tweets, stray statements. In Tlaib and Omar, you have two members of Congress that are open backers of hate, of BDS, which is an anti-Semitic movement. Its aim is to destroy, eliminate the one Jewish state on the planet. That marks them out, and they have been accepted. They are being told it's okay. And this really does imply, I guess, the creeping Corbynization, referring to what's happened to Britain's Labour Party. It's starting in America. It's starting with the Democrats. It's not there yet because, Ilhan Omar is not the Speaker of the House. She's not the leader of the Democratic Party. But the leadership of the Democratic Party has decided they cannot afford to alienate their base by taking her on, by even reprimanding her mildly. And that's really, we've crossed the Rubicon there with that issue.
And then Senator Bernie Sanders, obviously running for president, he issued a statement calling for efforts to ensue a veiled rebuke. He said that it's wrong, and he warned that such a rebuke would ultimately stifle Middle East debate.
Yeah, I think he wasn't alone. Yesterday, Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris, whom we're being told by some pundits is running to be one of the moderates in the Democratic Party. All three, moderate. We're redefining moderate among many other terms. All three of them rose to her defense, buying her narrative that she's the victim here. And let's be very clear. This is not about criticizing Israel, the right to criticize Israel. Of course, it's okay to criticize Israel's policies, the policies of its government. 7 million Israelis get up every morning and criticize their government the way 230 million, Americans get up and criticize their government. It's a democracy. That's fine. What Omar and Tlaib and what their supporters on the left are calling for, or wanting to legitimize, is not criticizing Israel's government. It's about eliminating Israel, the one Jewish state on the planet. That is, by definition, anti-Semitic. That's the problem here. That's the elephant in the room that everybody's ignoring. She came into Congress endorsing a hate movement, and why are we surprised when she follows up with anti-Semitic statements. I mean, we're told by some people on the left, some liberals, some people who say that they're for Israel, say, well, there's a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Well, Ilhan Omar is the living, breathing proof that that is not true, because where one is, the other follows. And that's why she can't keep her mouth shut about this, even after being rebuked by Pelosi a month ago.
And
this is who she is, and this is what her supporters are calling for.
Well, and her gal pal, the most popular Democrat socialist in the country, Ocasio-Cortez, I mean, and that's now one of many infamous interviews she's given. She referred to Palestine. She has sort of intimated, sort of in a jokey way, it's not funny, that a map of the Middle East wouldn't include a state of Israel, like her friends Representatives Omar and Tlaib have done. So, I mean, when you look at Ocasio-Cortez, do you see ignorance, or meaning she just doesn't know, or do you see ignorance in the form of anti-Semitism emanating from her as well?
Well, she's an interesting case, isn't she? Because she made some statements last summer, and then she backed off from them. She had for several months tried to stay out of the Israel portion of the socialist agenda, because it didn't really jive with her effort to be, the young rock star of the Democratic Party. It wasn't in her interest. But now that Omar has opened up this can of worms, she's dived in. She's backing Omar. She's blaming it on supporters of Israel. She owns this now too. As for whether she's just ignorant or hateful, the answer to that question is really kind of immaterial. I don't really care where it's coming from. I judge people by their actions, not necessarily by their intentions. But what we have here is someone who cannot make a moral choice. She sees Omar and Tlaib and the rest of the left of the party as these are her guys. These are her friends. And, she sees it's part of this intersectional ideology, which is this insidious theory that, rose out of academia, the fever swamps of academia, that holds that the Palestinian war on Israel's existence is somehow an extension of the struggle for civil rights in the United States. This is a lie, a big lie, but it's bought by a lot of people on the left, people, the former CNN guy, Mark Lamont Hill, others have promoted this, and it's kind of there. And, the real choice is Bernie Sanders, people like that, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, who on the one hand say, oh, we're for Israel. We criticize its government, but we're for Israel. And yet you're buying into this fake theory. You're buying into this lie that the question with Omar is, is it okay to criticize Israel? No, that's not what's at stake here. What's at stake here is anti-Semitism. And the sad thing is that the Democrats can't make a choice. It's a very simple choice, but because of the politics, because of the direction of their party, they're incapable of doing it, and people need to draw conclusions from that.
Absolutely. Since we have you, geopolitical question on Israel, the announcement last week that Bibi Netanyahu is to be indicted on bribery charges and whatnot, and questions about whether he will survive politically, and if he doesn't, what that means for the future of Israel and Israel's relationship with the United States in the final 2 years of Trump's first term.
Well, I'll answer the last part first. If he is defeated, and if Benny Gantz, the head of this new blue and white party, as it's now called, centrist coalition, if he winds up being prime minister, the answer is nothing will really change, because the reason why he is a plausible alternative to Netanyahu is that on the big issues of peace and the Palestinians, his stance are virtually identical to that of Netanyahu. I mean, that's something that people in the United States don't really understand. But the left in Israel just basically disintegrated.
Yeah.
There is no more left.
Yeah, it's shocking, actually.
It's interesting. People think, oh, Israel's divided down the middle, left and right. It's not true. The left in Israel has disintegrated. And if Netanyahu is now, might well be beaten for reasons, even if the indictments hadn't come down. He was in trouble because, we have term limits in this country for a reason. Conservatives believe in term limits, right? At least most of them. Netanyahu's been in office for 10 straight years, and people are sick of that. He's done a great job in many, many respects. He's a very able prime minister. He's one of the few people in that country that really understands economics, at least in the political class. But, he's been there for 10 years. He was prime minister for 3 years in the 90s before that. It's enough. And the people around him get that sense of entitlement. That's where many of these scandals stem from. I honestly think, as far as the scandals, just to say briefly, I doubt, that if this was taking place in America, I doubt that any charges would be filed. These are really slender, slender charges. He's being accused of being corrupt because he tried to influence the media,
right,
which is mostly against him in Israel. So the charges don't really amount to that much. Yes, he took personal gifts, but we don't indict people for stuff like that in this country. Even rabid special prosecutors. But throw that out. The point is, people are kind of sick of his act. He might still yet pull it out one way or the other. It's not by no means decided. But the reason why it's a race is because there isn't really a debate in Israel, at least in a broad consensus that stretches from sort of the center left to the center right, about peace. I think Israelis would gladly embrace peace, but they know they don't have a peace partner, and they know that replicating the experiment that Ariel Sharon did in 2005, where he withdrew from Gaza, pulled out every Israeli soldier, settler, and settlement. And what did they get? Did they trade land for peace? No, they traded land for more terror. They got a terrorist state in Gaza to deal with because of that. Nobody's going to do that in the larger, more strategic West Bank. And as I said, Benny Gantz and his party, their ideas about peace, they may sound a little different in the way they phrase it, but the policies are the same as Netanyahu's. So nothing really would change in terms of the things that, we care about, that Israelis care about, and certainly the U.S.-Israel relationship would not go down the drain because of that.
And they won't have a partner in peace if we elect a socialist in this country in 2020, so that's something to think about as well. He's Jonathan Tobin. Right. He's the editor-in-chief of Jewish News Syndicate and contributor to a number of publications, including NRO, New York Post, Federalist, and the Jewish Week. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you. I appreciate coming on.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper, hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.